Hi, my name is Victoria, and today I'm going to be doing a book review of The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This has been a very hyped book. It is all the rage, and it was all the rage when it was first released a couple months ago, and I totally fell under the hype spell, the hype train, and I really wanted to pick it up the moment that it came out, and I did, but it ended up taking me so long to finish that I didn't finish it until the month of May, the beginning of May, even though it came out in February and I had it at the end of February. But here we are, we've finished this behemoth of a book. It is 800 pages or so. And yeah, let's talk about it. This book is slightly difficult to summarize, so I will do my best. But just know I'm probably leaving some things out because there's a lot going on. It's a very complex world. And I'm actually going to put this book down because this sucker is heavy. But basically there are two kingdoms in this book, and we switch between the perspectives of the kingdom East versus West. In the East we have two main characters. The first one and most prominent one being a character named Tane. And Tane is a young lady who is sort of an apprentice. She is training to be a dragon rider, and that entails a lot of respect and high status, and someone who is basically trusted by dragons to kind of bond with them and you become a warrior. And then also on the eastern side we have a character named Nicolas Ruse, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, but he is an alchemist, and he has been banished when we meet him to a remote island in the east. He's actually from the west, I think, but he's been banished by the queen, and when we meet him we don't know why. We just know he's been banished and he lives sort of this isolated life away from his family and friends. Then on the western side we mostly follow a character named Avid. In fact, I would say most of the book is from her perspective. Avid is a lady of the court, lady in waiting, and she is sworn to protect Queen Sabran, who rules over the western kingdom of Ines. Queen Sabran is part of a very long line of descendants of the house of Berethnet. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that right either, but she has a long line of descendants. She's the end of the line. In the belief of the people of the West, as long as Queen Sabran sits on the throne, or a descendant of hers sits on the throne, they are going to be protected from this catastrophic event happening. And I won't give away what that event is because that's a main plot point of the story. But we are basically very thankful that she's on the throne, and she has to create an heir so that this terrible catastrophic event does not occur in the future. We also sometimes see the story through a perspective of a character named Loth, and Loth is a friend of Queen Sabran and Aed. He knows them, and we discover some important plot points through his perspective. We don't get a lot from this character. So by seeing through the eyes of these different characters, we also learn the politics of each region and the ways in which the two regions connect with each other or don't connect with each other, and also the ways in which dragons come into play. And each of the kingdoms see dragons very differently. The eastern regions kind of see them as gods and deities, and the western kingdom sees them as a threat, and they are not to have any kind of like relationship with dragons. So they have very different ideas of the world and dragons, and there's this whole religion around it, and it's very complicated and it's very interesting. In my book reviews, I like to start with the 3 things that I loved about a book, and then I will finish the book review with 3 main things that I think could be improved or things that I didn't love. So let's start with the things that I did love. I really loved the world building. This world is richly developed, it is intricate, it is complex, and it is colorful. This is a world that I would like to revisit. I know this is supposed to be a standalone novel, but I would love to revisit the world. I think there's a lot there, and I think there's a lot more to be explored, and yeah, I actually really hope she writes more and makes it a series. I know it's not supposed to be a series, I think, but I would like to see more. Samantha Shannon takes a lot of time to paint the picture of this world. She gives us a lot of details at once, and honestly sometimes too many details at once, I thought, but I still think she did a really good job of creating this world and making it come to life for us. I especially liked learning about the different folklore and the religions that the two different kingdoms kind of hold on to and how it shapes their worldview and their culture. I found that to be one of the most interesting aspects of the story. The second thing that I really loved about this book was the complex characters and the building of the characters. We have a lot of characters who are not clean cut. They're not good or evil. They have a lot of doubts and fears and failings, and it makes them more human. It makes them more believable and relatable. There are quite a few characters that make bad decisions along with good decisions, and knowing their motives behind it helps you have some empathy for them, and even the bad characters can kind of do some heroic things and have sort of a redemption, but it doesn't erase the bad they've done. But there's a lot to the characters, and I appreciated the details and the time that Samantha Shannon took into writing the characters. One character in particular who is sort of a dichotomy between good and evil is Nicolas Ruse, who is the alchemist who is banished to this remote island. And he is a character who I really hated a lot of the time, but I also could understand him, and I could understand from his backstory. I could develop empathy from him. So even though I didn't like his life choices and I didn't agree with the things he was doing, you could kind of see where he was coming from. Another really well-written character I thought was Queen Sabran. She had a lot of layers to her. She's the strong queen who has to present a strong image to her people, to be, their confidence, but we also see she has a lot of fears and failings and doubts and nightmares, and she has a lot going on under the surface, but she never lets that out. She can never let that show, and I found Sabran to be a really good character. And the third thing that I thought was really strong in this book was the dragons and the magic system around the dragons. I really liked that the dragons can actually talk in this book, well, most of them, so we get some dialogue from dragons, which I'm always a fan of. I know some people aren't for some reason, but why not? I love it when creatures talk. I wish creatures talked to me. Is that a weird thing to say? Maybe. But also interesting about these dragons is we have sort of two kinds of dragons. We have some antagonistic dragons who just want to burninate the countryside. Trogdor, anyone? No? Well, props if you get that reference. And then on the other side, we have these benevolent, sparkly, wise dragons who want to work with humans. They want good things for the world. They don't want the world to burn. So I enjoyed having good dragons and bad dragons in the same world, and the dragons are fighting, and I thought that was cool. My only complaint in that area is there wasn't enough dragon action. I thought we could have had a little bit more. I would not have complained if there were more dragon conversations. And now for the three things that I didn't love about this book. This first one is maybe seemingly a small thing, but it was annoying enough to me that it was a distraction, and that is that Samantha Shannon made up words for commonplace things that already have a word, but she made like a fantastical word for them. And we have to have a whole glossary in the back of the book to explain what these things are, because you can't really understand what they are from the context when you're reading. And to me, that's a mistake. If I were writing a book, you want your readers to understand fantastical words from context. I mean, I guess there's nothing wrong with the glossary either, but for example, let me just give you an example here. For example, Emmett is an ant. Why can't we just say ants? Why do we have to say Emmett? I don't know. That seems unnecessary. A spy is called an intelligencer. Why can't we call them spies? Your guess is as good as mine. A meerswine is a dolphin or a porpoise. Why don't we have the word dolphin in this world? I don't know. But you see what I mean? Like, I have to look up words every time I come across something, and it was unnecessary, and it annoyed me. And don't get me wrong, I have no problem with language in fantasy and like creating different words and a language for your world. But This was overkill. There were just way too many of them, and it made it more complex, and I didn't like having to flip back and forth in the book while I was reading. And so yeah, that may be a small issue, but it was an issue. The second weaker thing about this book is the pacing. The pacing of this book is a little bit unpredictable and unbalanced. And what I mean by that is we spend hundreds and hundreds of pages building up to certain events and epic things, epic battles, and then the actual epic event is done in like a few pages. And it just seemed like all the detail was in the build-up, and then the actual thing was just like, and then this happened, and then they did this, and then the end. If you're gonna put me through all of those pages to read, like, give me a reward at the end, you know, give me more, put more detail into your ending. The ending was really disappointing. It just kind of wrapped up, and it felt just kind of like rushed and lukewarm. I didn't really feel for them. I was just like, okay, well, it's over. I didn't have that, like, I had to flip the page. I was like, I could just put it down in the middle of a battle and come back to it later, and I felt distance from it, and I think the pacing had a big part of that. And the third thing that I did not like about this book was the third person omniscient point of view. I felt like the way the story was told from the third person created some distance. If you're gonna do multi-perspectives in a book, I would much rather you do first person, and that way I'm actually in that character's head and I can have a little more personal connection with them. Being in third person created, I felt like I was at an arm's length. That was my arm. See my arm? That's how far away the character was. I also thought we jumped between too many characters. For example, Loth was a character that I didn't think was really necessary. I thought maybe we could discover things a different way. Loth had no really personality, I felt like. In fact, that is another I know I'm supposed to keep it to 3 complaints, but the men in this book have very little personality. It's all about the women, which is fine if that's what you want to do with your book. That's great. Female powered fantasy is something that we all need in our lives. And I really liked that aspect, but it did feel like the men were too weak, almost like embarrassingly so. Almost like it was kind of putting them down. I don't know. But again, I think that was the point, was she wanted the females to be in the front and center, and she wanted them to be strong female characters, and they definitely are. But in my opinion, if you want them to be the focus, then why do we have these other perspectives like Niclai's Ruse and Loth? I didn't think we really needed their perspectives. If we had just had Tane and Aad and had like a first person perspective from their point of view, I thought that would have been much stronger. And I really wanted more of Tane's story. She had a really interesting world and background, and she was the dragon rider, and I would have liked to see that world expand more. We get mostly Aad and very little of Tane, and Tane was actually a story that I wanted to get behind more. So I just felt like Samantha Shannon was just trying to do too much. There was too many perspectives, and I didn't connect with any of them in the end because there was too much happening. And I'll also add this. There is a female-female romance in this book, which is great and was very sweet, and I liked it a lot. However, it felt like insta-love. We didn't actually get a relationship build-up that made sense. It was kind of like they suddenly liked each other in that way. And I wasn't expecting it, actually. It actually surprised me when I realized that was happening, because I just felt like there wasn't appropriate build-up. And again, maybe if I had been in Aad's head in a first-person perspective, I could have known that that was going on. But from the third person, I didn't pick up the clues, I guess. I don't know. So yeah, that was probably the most disappointing thing about this book, was the distance that I felt from the story and from the characters. Taking everything into consideration, I think I'm landing on a 3.5 or 4-star rating for this book. It had so many great things going for it, and I just love the world. I would love to read more in this world. However, there were some execution issues that I had with the actual writing, the actual pacing, the execution of the story. that I wish had been there. This was one of my most anticipated reads, and I was thinking this was going to be a 5-star book for me, but it just didn't quite live up to that 5-star mark. However, I still will definitely recommend it because I think it's a solid fantasy novel, and I think there's a lot of people who this is a 5-star book for, but I had some just kind of nitpicky issues with it. It is a big novel, so if you go for it, like, you have to go for it. You can't just start this half-heartedly, you know. You have to really invest your time in it. And is it worth the time? I would say yes. I would say yes. But just know it's not a perfect book. I don't think it is the next greatest thing in fantasy. But I had a good time reading this book. Thank you so much for watching my review, and let me know what you thought of this book if you read it, or if you're planning on picking it up, let me know that too. If you've read it, do you have some of the same thoughts? Do you have different thoughts? I would love to have a conversation about this book because there's a lot there. There's a lot to talk about. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe if you would like to see more content from me. I try to put out bookish videos every week, although I've been recently not very good at that, but we're trying to get back on the horse. Have a wonderful rest of your day or night, and I will see you in my next video. Bye-bye.